Imagine this, you've just arrived at your Airbnb. You're exhausted from travel, ready to crash, maybe grab a bite. You unlock the door, step inside, and something feels off. Just a little whisper of unease. You brush it off, of course. It's just your imagination, right? You're safe, you paid for safety. But what if that feeling wasn't imagination? What if the place you just committed to for days, even weeks, is actually a living nightmare? Tonight, we're exploring the chilling reality of Airbnb experiences gone terrifyingly wrong. These are true accounts of shattered trust, of unsettling discoveries, and of terrifying encounters that prove that sometimes, the scariest things aren't in the shadows. They're right there, in plain sight, in the place you least expect it. If you haven't already, take a quick second to check if you're subscribed. You don't want to miss our next chilling narrative. The little cottage looked like something out of a storybook. It was nestled deep in the Maine woods, far from any main road, surrounded by ancient pines that whispered secrets in the breeze. My wife, Sarah, had found it on Airbnb, a last-minute getaway to celebrate our 5th anniversary. Perfect for unplugging, she'd said, and she was right. No TV, no Wi-Fi, just us, the quiet, and a stack of old board games. We arrived as the late afternoon sun slanted through the trees, painting long shadows across the porch. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine needles and damp earth. Inside, the cottage was cozy, if a little rustic. A stone fireplace dominated the living room, and shelves crammed with dusty books lined the walls. It felt lived in a good way. Like a place that had seen many quiet moments, the first couple of days were blissful. We hiked the nearby trails, cooked simple meals, and spent our evenings by the fire, reading or playing Scrabble. The silence was profound, only broken by the crackle of burning logs or the occasional hoot of an owl. It was exactly what we needed. Then, on our 3rd day, Sarah discovered them. We were looking for a deck of cards in a small, antique trunk tucked away under a window seat. Beneath a stack of old linen, she pulled out 3 small, leather-bound journals. They looked old, worn, their pages slightly yellowed. "Looks like someone forgot these," she murmured, her thumb stroking the worn cover of the top one. No names on them. We were both curious. It felt a little like snooping, but also like stumbling upon a hidden treasure. The first journal was dated roughly 2 years prior to our stay. The handwriting was neat, elegant. It belonged to a woman named Clara. She wrote about her solo retreat to the cottage, seeking peace after a difficult period in her life. Her entries started off serene, detailing walks, meditations, and her joy in the simple quiet. Day 5. The tranquility here is absolute. I haven't felt this still in years. The trees seem to hum with a gentle energy. As we read on, a subtle shift began. Day 9, I keep hearing things. Faint whispers like the wind, but not quite. And sometimes, a soft knocking from the walls at night, probably just the old house settling. Clara's entries grew more frequent and more agitated. She started describing shadows she couldn't quite make out, feelings of being watched, and a pervasive chill that seemed to cling to the cottage even when the fire roared. Day 14. The knocking is louder now. It sounds like impatience. And the whispers, they're almost words. I tried to make out what they were saying, but it's always just beyond my grasp. I'm starting to feel quite unwell. Her final entry sent a shiver down my spine. Day 18. They want something. I don't know what. They're everywhere now. In the corners of my eyes, breathing on my neck. I can't sleep. I can't leave. It's like the air itself is pressing down on me. I hear them scratching at the walls. They're getting in. The journal ended there. No explanation, no further entries. Just those chilling words. We picked up the second journal, a newer one, dated about a year after Clara's last entry. The handwriting was bolder, belonged to a man named David. His tone was initially skeptical, almost dismissive of any strange occurrences. He was at the cottage for a writing retreat. Day 3, heard a few odd creaks tonight. Guess this old place has a lot of character. My publisher says I need to embrace the solitude. Right. Soon, David's entries mirrored Clara's descent into unease. He too mentioned the whispers, the persistent knocking, and a growing sense of isolation that felt unnatural. Day 10. Funny, thought I saw something outside my window last night. Just a flicker, gone in an instant. My nerves are getting the better of me, need to finish this chapter. His transformation was faster, more volatile. His writing became sloppy, frantic. Day 15, it's not in my head. There's something scratching at the walls behind the plaster. It sounds like claws, and the whispering is clearer now. They're calling me. They know my name. How do they know my name? David's last entry was scribbled hurriedly, barely legible. Day 17, don't open it. Don't let them in. They promise things, but it's a trick. I almost did. I heard the floorboards groan above me, like someone walking in the attic, but there is no attic. Just like Clara's, David's journal ended abruptly. My stomach churned. Sarah was pale, clinging to my arm. The peaceful quiet of the cottage now felt heavy, suffocating. Then, Sarah found the third journal. It was the newest, dated just 3 months before our arrival. The handwriting was delicate, almost childlike. It was from a young woman named Emily. Day 1, so excited for this trip. My first time renting a place all by myself. The woods are so beautiful, and the cottage is just adorable. Emily's early entries were full of innocent joy. She baked, read, and explored the surrounding nature. But the familiar patterns began to emerge, chillingly, as if reading a script. Day 6, a strange chill in the living room, even with the fire going. And I keep hearing faint sounds, like someone sighing just outside the door. Must be the wind. By this point, the familiar noises of the cottage, the creaks, the groans of old wood took on a sinister edge. Every rustle of leaves outside sounded like a deliberate movement. Day 11, the whispering, it's telling me things, dark things. And tonight, I saw an eye at the window. Just a single glowing eye staring in. It was gone when I looked directly. Am I going crazy? Her final entries were terrifying. Day 14, they're so close. I can feel their breath. They want me to listen. They want me to join them. My head hurts. I keep scratching myself without even realizing it. The walls, they're thin, so thin. Day 16, I understand now. They've been here all along, waiting. They just needed someone to hear, to truly listen. I hear them moving above me now, in the attic that doesn't exist. They're coming for me. I think I'm letting them. The journal fell from Sarah's trembling fingers. We stared at each other, the weight of those words pressing down on us. The silence in the cottage was no longer peaceful. It was expectant, and then we heard it. A faint scratch, scratch, scratch from directly above us. A sound like long, sharp nails dragging across wood, but there was no attic. Just ceiling beams directly leading to the roof. We scrambled, gathering our things in a frenzied panic. Every shadow seemed to stretch. Every creak of the old house sounded like a pursuing footstep. We practically threw our bags into the car, not saying a word, our eyes darting around the darkening woods. As I fumbled with the keys, the distinct sound of someone sighing echoed from the porch, right behind us. A deep, drawn-out exhalation that wasn't human, and certainly wasn't the wind. We didn't look back. I jammed the car into reverse and sped down the winding dirt road, leaving the storybook cottage and its terrible secrets behind us in the twilight. We never stopped until we reached the highway, the distant glow of streetlights feeling like a beacon of sanity. We canceled the rest of our stay, of course, giving some flimsy excuse. We never told anyone about the journals, not really. How could we? It sounded insane. But even now, months later, in the quiet of our own home, I sometimes hear faint whispers just beyond my hearing. And if the house creaks at night, a deep, primal chill settles in my bones. I still wonder what Clara, David, and Emily truly heard in that silent cottage, and what they finally let in. And sometimes, I swear, I hear a soft, insistent scratch, scratch, scratch coming from the attic of our perfectly normal house. An attic which, just like that cottage, does not exist. It was a Friday evening, and I was pulling into the quiet, tree-lined street of Asheville, North Carolina. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine and impending autumn. My boyfriend, Mark, and I had been planning this getaway for months, a long weekend of hiking, craft breweries, and just escaping the city grind. We'd booked an Airbnb near the edge of town, a charming Victorian that looked inviting in the listing photos. Standing on the porch, fumbling with the lockbox, I remember feeling a sense of immediate calm. The house had a welcoming light in its bay window, and the porch swing creaked softly in the breeze. Inside, it was exactly as pictured. High ceilings, hardwood floors, and a quirky mix of antique furniture and modern art. We tossed our bags down, made a quick dinner, and settled onto the comfortable sofa, ready for a serene few days. The first oddity subtle, barely noticeable, came that night. We were heading upstairs to bed, and I remember Mark stopping at the top of the stairs, looking down the hallway. He mumbled, that's a lot of doors. I glanced over. He was right. On the second floor, there was our bedroom, a bathroom, and then 3 other closed doors along the main hall. A little unusual for what seemed to be a 2-bedroom house, but I shrugged it off. Old houses often have strange layouts. The next day, we woke up to sunlight streaming through the windows. Mark made coffee, and I started planning our hike. After breakfast, as we were getting ready to leave, Mark went upstairs to grab his jacket. I heard him call out, a hint of amusement in his voice. Hey, you ever figure out what's behind all those doors? No idea, I called back. Probably closets, linen cabinets, who knows? A moment later, he came back down, a slight frown on his face. Okay, that's weird. I opened one, it was just a small closet with a few old blankets. But then I looked again, and there's like a new door, I chuckled. Mark, you're just sleepy. What are you talking about? He shook his head. No, seriously. Come look, reluctantly, I followed him upstairs. He pointed to the hallway. There, in addition to the ones I'd seen before, was a small, unassuming door tucked into an alcove, almost hidden by a tall antique coat rack. It was a pale, faded blue, contrasting with the dark wood of the other doors. I couldn't believe I hadn't noticed it before. See, Mark said, a triumphant look on his face. It wasn't there last night. I ran my hand over the cool wood. It felt solid. That's odd, I conceded. Maybe it was just tucked behind the coat rack. Hard to see in the dark, he opened it. It led to a cramped, empty space, barely a foot deep, with a single cobweb dangling from the ceiling. A broom closet, perhaps. We both laughed it off, attributing it to our tired brains and the house's quirks. We locked up and headed out for our hike, the strange discovery already fading from our minds, but the oddities continued. That evening, after a long day on the trails, we returned to the house. As I walked into the kitchen, I noticed a door I hadn't seen before. It was just next to the pantry, a narrow, dark wooden door that blended almost perfectly with the wainscoting. My heart gave a little skip. Mark. I called, my voice a little too high. Did you notice this door in the kitchen earlier? He ambled in, carrying a bag of groceries. He looked at where I was pointing. No, he said, his brow furrowing. Never saw that one. He tried the handle. It was locked. A shiver ran down my spine. This wasn't a game of find the hidden door anymore. This was unnerving. We were two logical people, not prone to flights of fancy. Yet doors were appearing. Out of nowhere. Maybe the owners are really into hidden? I offered lamely. Mark just shook his head, a thoughtful, almost worried expression on his face. That night, sleep didn't come as easily. Every creak of the old house sounded like a door opening or closing. I kept replaying what Mark had said about the blue door upstairs, how it hadn't been there the night before, and now the kitchen one. It didn't make any sense. The next morning, the tension in the house was palpable. We didn't talk about the doors directly, but the unspoken question hung in the air. Mark was making coffee, and I was staring out the window, pretending to be interested in a squirrel, when I heard a gasp from the living room. Oh my God, Mark whispered. I spun around. He was standing in the archway leading from the kitchen to the living room, his face pale. He pointed a trembling finger. There, on the far wall of the living room, where an antique bookshelf had been the day before, was another door. This one was grander than the others, a dark, heavy oak with an ornate metal knocker in the shape of a lion's head. It looked ancient, out of place in the relatively bright, airy room, and the bookshelf that had been there, gone. Vanished. My breath hitched in my throat. This was impossible. This was a house, not a TARDIS. My mind raced, searching for any logical explanation. Renovation, a hidden passage. But the bookshelf was gone. What is happening? I managed to croak. Mark walked slowly towards the new door, his hand outstretched. He reached for the knocker, but hesitated. The silence in the room was deafening. The sunlight, which had seemed so welcoming, now felt predatory, highlighting the stark reality of the new, ominous portal. Then, slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, the lion's head knocker began to move. Just a tiny, almost imperceptible twitch. Then it lifted slightly, as if an invisible hand was raising it. A cold, metallic thunk, then another. Thunk, thunk, thunk dash thunk dash thunk. It was knocking. From the other side, my blood ran cold. Mark froze, his eyes wide with terror. The knocking grew louder, more insistent, echoing through the old house. It wasn't a gentle rap. It was a rhythmic, forceful pounding, a desperate demand for entry. My heart hammered against my ribs. I grabbed Mark's arm, my fingers digging into his skin. We have to go, I whispered, my voice barely audible. He didn't move. He was mesmerized, staring at that door, at the lion's head that continued to hammer against the wood. The knocking stopped abruptly. The silence that followed was even worse. And then, from behind the door, we heard it. A faint scraping sound, like something heavy being dragged across an uneven floor. It was slow, deliberate. And it was moving closer to the door. Then came a soft click. The doorknob began to turn. Slowly, deliberately, revealing the dark, keyhole-shaped opening. No, I screamed, pulling Mark with all my might. We stumbled backwards, tripping over the coffee table. Pure, unadulterated panic flooded my senses. This wasn't a cozy Airbnb. It was a trap. We scrambled for the front door, slipping on the hardwood. I fumbled frantically with the deadbolt, my hands shaking so violently I could barely grasp the lock. The scraping sound behind the living room door intensified, growing louder, closer. It sounded heavy, dragging something incredibly weighty. Finally, the lock clicked. We burst out onto the porch, gasping for breath, not daring to look back. We didn't even grab our bags. We jumped into the car, Mark fumbling with the keys, his face ashen. As we sped away from the house, I glanced in the rearview mirror. The charming Victorian looked placid, innocent under the morning sun. But somewhere inside, I knew, behind that new, ornate door, something had been scraping, something had been waiting. And it had almost gotten out. We never contacted the Airbnb owners. We just drove until the sun was setting, putting as much distance between us and that house as possible. Even now, years later, the memory sends a shiver down my spine. I avoid old houses. And whenever I see a door, especially one in an unexpected place, I can't help but wonder what lies behind it. Because I learned that day, some doors aren't meant to be found. And some things that knock from the other side aren't looking for a friendly visit. It was supposed to be a relaxing getaway, just me and my husband, Mark. Life had been a whirlwind of work and responsibilities lately, and we desperately needed a break. We found this charming Airbnb online, nestled in what looked like a quaint, unassuming little town a few hours' drive from the city. The photos showed a cozy, rustic cabin with a beautiful view of a small lake. It looked perfect. We arrived late Friday afternoon. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth. The cabin itself was exactly as pictured: warm wooden interiors, a stone fireplace, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the water. We spent the first evening unpacking, cooking a simple meal, and sipping wine by the fire, just enjoying the quiet. It was bliss. The next morning, Saturday, was leisurely. We woke up late, made coffee, and decided to take a stroll down by the lake. When we got back, I decided to take a nice long bath. The bathroom was quite spacious, with an old-fashioned clawfoot tub and a large mirror above the sink. As I ran the water, I noticed something odd. There was a small, almost imperceptible smudge on the mirror, right in the center. I leaned in closer to wipe it, thinking it was just a watermark or dust. But as my finger touched it, I realized it wasn't on the surface. It looked like it was behind the glass. It was tiny, no bigger than a pinhead, and perfectly round. My first thought was a defect in the mirror, but something about its precise circular shape felt deliberate. I tried to scratch at it to see if it would come off, but it was smooth. My curiosity piqued. I grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight, and shined it directly at the spot. That's when I saw it. Two tiny, almost invisible wires, thinner than a strand of hair, seemed to disappear into the wall behind the mirror. And right at the center of that tiny, round mark, there was a faint, almost microscopic lens. My stomach dropped. It looked exactly like a pinhole camera. My heart started to pound against my ribs. No, this couldn't be. This was an Airbnb, a place for guests. This had to be something else. Maybe a humidity sensor, a light sensor. I tried to rationalize it, but the wires, the lens, it all screamed camera. I immediately called Mark, who was in the living room reading. /Mark, you need to come here. Now, my voice must have betrayed my panic because he was in the bathroom in an instant. What is it? What's wrong, he asked, seeing the look on my face. Look, I said, pointing a trembling finger at the mirror. Right there. He leaned in, squinting. What am I looking at? A smudge, no, look closer. Get your phone flashlight, he did, and as the bright beam hit the spot, his face went from curious to horrified. Oh my God, is that? I think it's a camera, Mark. A hidden camera, I whispered, the words feeling foreign and terrifying in my mouth. We stood there for a moment, just staring at it, unable to process it. The implications were chilling. Someone had been watching us, or were still watching us, in the bathroom, where I had been minutes ago, about to take a bath, where we had showered the night before. All our private moments, potentially recorded, streamed, God knows what a wave of nausea washed over me. All that peace, all that relaxation, shattered into a million pieces. I felt violated, exposed, utterly disgusted. We need to get out of here. Now Mark said, his voice low and firm. He was usually the calm one, but I could see the anger simmering in his eyes. We quickly packed our bags, our minds racing. Every creak of the floorboards, every shadow seemed sinister. We moved with a frantic urgency, wanting nothing more than to be away from that place. As we hurried out, I couldn't help but glance back at the cabin, the picturesque setting now a facade for something deeply disturbing. Mark called Airbnb support as soon as we were in the car, driving away with the windows down, needing the cool air to clear our heads. He explained the situation, his voice tight with controlled rage. They were apologetic, promised a full refund, and assured us they would investigate immediately and contact the host. I reported it to the local police too, though I didn't hold out much hope. What evidence did we have beyond a tiny lens and some wires? The drive home was quiet, heavy with an unspoken dread. We kept looking in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see some dark sedan following us, even though it was irrational. The sense of being watched, of being vulnerable, clung to me like a suffocating shroud. For weeks afterward, I felt it. That sickening sensation of exposure. Every time I stepped into my own bathroom, I'd instinctively scan the mirror, the walls, the ceiling, paranoid that there might be another tiny lens staring back. I changed all my online passwords, convinced that somehow, somewhere, our privacy had been utterly compromised. I couldn't shake the image of someone, a stranger, observing us in our most intimate moments. The idea was truly sickening. We never heard back from the Airbnb host directly. Airbnb informed us they had removed the listing and banned the host from the platform, but that felt like cold comfort. The police said they did an investigation, but without a warrant, which they needed strong reason for, they couldn't dismantle the mirror. They advised us to let them know if anything suspicious happened later, like our identities being stolen or sensitive photos surfacing online. It was chilling to think that was the resolution. It's been months now, and the intense paranoia has faded to a dull ache. But the feeling of violation, the knowledge that somewhere out there, footage of us might exist, still lingers. It's a profound sense of loss, not material loss, but the loss of a fundamental sense of safety, of privacy, especially in a space you pay for, a space you expect to be a sanctuary. The idea that someone could so casually, so brazenly invade your personal space, record you without your consent, it truly chills me to my core. I still use Airbnb sometimes, but never without a thorough sweep of every room now. Every clock, every smoke detector, every seemingly innocuous object. Because you never know what tiny secret might be lurking, hidden in plain sight, waiting to strip away your sense of security without you even realizing it. The world suddenly felt a lot less safe after that weekend, and it's a lesson I learned in the most invasive way imaginable. The camera in the bathroom mirror. It's what taught me that some horrors aren't about things that go bump in the night, but about the quiet, insidious violation of trust, the unseen eyes that linger long after you've left. And that kind of fear, the fear of the unseen observer, is the kind that truly stays with you. If any of these Airbnb nightmares sent a shiver down your spine, please take a moment to hit the like button. It truly helps the channel. The summer I turned 25, I decided I needed to get away. Not just a weekend trip, but a proper escape. My life in the city felt like a hamster wheel, the same cramped apartment, the same soul-crushing commute, the same empty evenings. I craved quiet, open spaces, and nights so dark you could almost touch the stars scrolling through Airbnb. I stumbled upon it. The Hermit's Hollow Perfect Rural Retreat. The photos showed a small, rustic cabin nestled deep in a forest, miles from anywhere. It looked exactly like the kind of place where you could lose yourself and maybe find a piece of yourself you didn't know was missing. It was booking number 173. The dates were open, the price was reasonable, and something about the absolute isolation of the place just sang to me. I booked it instantly. The drive out was long, stretching over 5 hours beyond the last sign of anything resembling a town. My GPS eventually gave up, replaced by a single, hand-drawn map sent by the host, a woman named Agnes. It was surprisingly detailed, with landmarks like the lightning-struck oak and the bridge with the missing rail. As the sun dipped lower, painting the sky in fiery oranges and purples, the world outside my car windows slowly transformed. Paved roads gave way to gravel, then to a dirt track barely wider than my car. The trees grew taller, denser, their branches interlocking overhead like the ribs of some ancient, colossal beast. The air grew cooler, carrying the scent of pine needles and damp earth. I passed the lightning-struck oak, a skeletal sentinel against the darkening sky. Then, the rickety bridge, its missing rail a gaping maw over a gurgling creek. The cabin, according to Agnes's map, should have been just beyond it. I drove slowly, my headlights cutting yellow tunnels through the deepening twilight. The track narrowed further, overgrown with ferns and brambles. I expected to see a small clearing, the welcoming glow of a porch light, perhaps even Agnes herself, but there was nothing. Just trees. More trees than I had ever seen in my life. The track ended abruptly, dissolving into an impassable thicket. I stopped the car, the engine ticking as it cooled, the silence that followed so profound it felt like a presence. I checked the map again, then my phone, desperate for a signal, anything. No service. Of course, this was exactly what I'd wanted, complete disconnection. But at this moment, it felt less like a luxury and more like a trappe shiver traced its way down my spine, though the air wasn't cold enough to warrant it. It was the kind of shiver that comes from an instinct far older than human reason. I was alone, miles from anywhere, and the cabin I'd booked simply wasn't there. I tried calling Agnes anyway, just in case. 3 long rings, then a click. It wasn't a voicemail, it was a disconnect, like the number didn't exist. My heart began to thump a little faster. I decided to try turning around. The track was so tight, it took an awkward, multi-point turn, my tires crunching over loose stones and snapping twigs. As my headlights swept across the dense woods, I saw it, just for a flicker. A shape. Tall, unnaturally thin, standing perfectly still amongst the trees, easily 50 feet from the track. It was indistinct, mostly shadow, but there was something about its stillness, its utter lack of movement, that wasn't natural. The trunks of the trees around it seemed to shimmer, as if distorting the air. My breath hitched. I quickly maneuvered the car so the headlights shone directly on the spot. Nothing, just the endless, impenetrable wall of trees. Had it been a trick of the light? Or was my mind, frayed by the isolation and the growing unease, playing tricks on me? I tried to tell myself it was nothing. I needed to get back to the main road, find a motel, and figure this out in the morning. I put the car in drive, cautiously inching forward. As I started to move, I heard it. A sound, faint at first, then growing louder. It wasn't coming from the woods. It was coming from inside my car. It was a whisper. A dry, papery rustle, like dead leaves skittering across a parched ground. And it was repeating something. I strained to hear, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. Booking number 173, my blood ran cold. The sound was coming from the back seat. I hadn't brought anyone with me. I was utterly alone, my eyes darted to the rearview mirror. In the dim reflection, the back seat was a void of shadow. I couldn't make out anything specific, but the whisper continued, closer now, almost directly behind my head. You have arrived. My foot slammed on the brake. The car skidded to a halt. The whispered words were so distinct now, so chillingly clear. I could feel a cold breath on the back of my neck. Panic seized me. I didn't dare look back. My hand fumbled for the gear shift, yanking it into reverse. The tires spun, spraying gravel. I didn't care where I was going, only that I had to get away from whatever was in my car, from this place, from the unbearable certainty that I was wrong about being alone. I floored the accelerator, driving backward down the narrow track, my head twisted to look through the rear window, desperate to make sure I wasn't going to hit a tree. The whispered voice behind me morphed into something else, a low, guttural hum that vibrated through the car's frame, vibrating through my very bones. The cabin waits? The humming grew louder, a deep, resonant thrum that seemed to fill the entire forest, muffling the sound of my own screaming engine. It felt like the ground itself was vibrating. And then, in my rearview mirror, as I careened wildly backward, I saw it, through the trees, a faint, almost illusory light. It wasn't the welcoming glow of a porch light. It was a pale, sickly yellow, pulsing rhythmically. And behind it, in the darkest shadows, the vague, impossible outline of a structure. It looked too tall, too narrow, its angles all wrong, like a child's drawing of a house that had been stretched and warped. It wasn't rustic, it was wrong. And as I watched, the light pulsed again, and the structure seemed to shimmer, to breathe. It was the cabin. The hermit's hollow, and it had always been there, just beyond the edge of perception. Waiting for booking 173 to arrive, I don't know how long I drove backward. I don't remember hitting anything, though I must have. All I remember is the unholy hum, the chilling whisper of my booking number, and the pulsating yellow light growing smaller and smaller in my mirror until it finally vanished. I drove all night, only stopping when I hit the first gas station that morning, the sky already bright and blue. My car was scratched, covered in mud, but otherwise seemed fine. I checked the back seat. Empty. The hum was gone, the whisper silent. I never saw the Hermit's Hollow listing on Airbnb again. It was gone like it had never existed. And the map Agnes sent? I found it tucked beneath my passenger seat. It was blank. A freshly folded, pristine white piece of paper. Not a single drawing, not a single landmark. Nothing. Sometimes, late at night, when the city is quiet, I can still feel a phantom chill on the back of my neck. And a dry, papery whisper, just at the edge of hearing, repeating my booking number. I never made it to the Hermit's Hollow. But I often wonder, with a cold dread that settles deep in my bones, did booking 173 ever truly leave? If you've ever had a strange encounter at an Airbnb, share your story in the comments below. We'd love to hear it. It was supposed to be a relaxing getaway, a break from the relentless hum of city life. My partner, Liam, and I had decided on a quiet week in the Irish countryside. We'd booked what looked like an idyllic Airbnb, a small cottage nestled on the edge of a national park, surrounded by nothing but rolling hills and ancient trees. The listing photos were beautiful. A stone cottage with a thatched roof, a welcoming fireplace, and endless green outside every window. The drive was long, stretching into a rainy Tuesday afternoon. As we left the main roads and ventured deeper into the countryside, the GPS signal started to waver, a minor annoyance we laughed off as part of the rural charm. Proper detox this, Liam had chuckled, adjusting the radio dial, which now only offered static. The directions from the Airbnb host, a woman named Maeve, were a little vague but seemed simple enough. Follow the old county road past the standing stones, take the third gravel track on your left. You'll see a large oak tree. The cottage is just beyond it. We found the standing stones easily enough, ancient, weather-beaten slabs rising from a field, their silhouettes stark against the bruised sky. Then came the gravel tracks. We took the third, just as instructed. It was narrower than expected, overgrown with tall grass and bordered by thick, dark hedges that seemed to swallow the last vestiges of daylight. Rain lashed against the windshield, making it hard to see. After what felt like an eternity, the track opened up a little. And there, partially obscured by the large oak tree Maeve had mentioned, was a cottage. It looked different from the photos. Smaller, for one thing, and darker. The thatch on the roof was disheveled, and the stone walls seemed almost black with damp. There was no welcoming glow from within. "Are you sure this is it?" I asked, a knot forming in my stomach. The air suddenly felt cold. Liam, ever the optimist, consulted the printed directions. "Must be, only cottage out this way. Give me a minute, I'll just check the key box." He got out, his footsteps crunching on the wet gravel. I watched him approach the heavy wooden door. He pulled a small rusted key from the lockbox and pushed the door open. A gust of stale, earthy air seemed to push back at him. "Well, it's certainly rustic," he called back, trying to sound cheerful. "Come on, let's get inside before we drown." Stepping into the cottage, the first thing that hit me was the smell. Damp earth blended with something vaguely sweet, like decaying flowers. The air was heavy still. The main room was small, dominated by a large stone fireplace that looked like it hadn't seen a fire in decades. There were 2 armchairs by the hearth, their upholstery faded and threadbare. A small, rickety table stood in the corner. It was far from the cozy, well-maintained place in the pictures. "It's not quite what I expected," I said, my voice barely a whisper. Liam tried to turn on the lights, but nothing happened. "No power? Must be a fuse or something." "I'll check the breaker box," he replied, heading into a small hallway. I heard the click of switches, then his frustrated sigh. Nothing, no power at all. That was the first real flicker of unease. An Airbnb with no power, way out in the middle of nowhere. I pulled out my phone. No signal, of course. "We can light some candles," Liam said, re-entering the room, a brave smile on his face. "Make it feel even cozier." He found a box of old, half-used candles in a cupboard above the fireplace and some matches. The flickering candlelight cast dancing shadows on the walls, making the small room feel even more enclosed. We soon learned there was no running water either. The taps in the tiny bathroom gurgled weakly, then nothing. "Okay, this is getting ridiculous," I said, starting to feel genuinely worried. "This isn't what we booked. Maybe we just got the wrong house?" Liam speculated, trying to sound practical, but I could see the same apprehension in his eyes. We decided to make the best of it, for the night at least. We unpacked only what we needed, mostly snacks and our sleeping bags, since the bed in the other room looked uninviting. The mattress was thin, covered by a musty, thin sheet as darkness truly fell. The silence outside was profound, broken only by the persistent drumming of rain on the roof and the occasional hoot of an owl. Inside, the candle flames wavered, making the shadows deepen and stretch like grasping fingers. The earthy, sweet smell seemed to cling to everything. I kept finding myself glancing at a large, dark stain on the stone floor near the fireplace. It was almost black, irregular in shape, and seemed to absorb the candlelight. I tried to ignore it, telling myself it was just damp or perhaps a spilled drink from a previous occupant. But my imagination kept conjuring other, darker possibilities. Liam was trying to distract himself by reading a book by candlelight. I, however, couldn't shake the growing sense of dread. The air felt heavy, like it was pressing in on me. I started to hear things that weren't their faint whispers carried on the wind, the shuffling of feet just beyond the closed door, a low, keening sound that seemed to come from inside the walls themselves. "Did you hear that?" I whispered, my voice trembling. Liam looked up from his book. "Hear what?" It sounded like a cry from outside. He listened for a moment. Just the wind, love, or maybe an animal. But it didn't sound like the wind, and it didn't sound like an animal. It sounded like something in immense pain or sorrow. I closed my eyes, trying to force the sounds away, to force away the feeling that we weren't alone in that isolated cottage, that something was watching us from the corners of the room, from the depths of the shadows. Then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, I started to notice a new chill, far colder than the damp air. It seeped from the floor, from the walls, making the hairs on my arms stand on end. The large, dark stain on the floor seemed to shimmer in the candlelight, as if something within it was stirring the sweet, decaying smell intensified, now almost sickening. I opened my eyes and saw it standing in the doorway connecting the main room to the tiny bedroom. Silhouetted against the slightly less dark opening was a figure. It was tall and gaunt, indistinct in the deep shadows, but I could make out the barest hint of tattered clothing and what looked like long, dark hair. It wasn't moving, just standing there observing us, my breath caught in my throat. I squeezed Liam's arm hard. He looked at me perplexed, then followed my gaze. His eyes widened and the color drained from his face. The book clattered to the floor, forgotten the figure didn't move, didn't make a sound. But I felt its presence like a suffocating weight. An ancient, profound sadness emanating from it, mixed with an icy, silent rage. My mind screamed at me to run, but my body was frozen. Liam, bless his brave heart, found his voice first, a strangled croak. "Hello, who's there?" The figure remained silent, motionless. But then, very slowly, it began to lift a hand. A long, skeletal finger emerged from the shadows, pointing directly at me. And as it did, a low, guttural moan filled the small room, seeming to vibrate through the very stone of the cottage. It wasn't coming from the figure, but from everywhere, from the walls, from the floor, from the very air around us, and then I understood. The dark stain on the floor, the suffocating smell, the profound cold. This wasn't an Airbnb. This wasn't even a house, it was a tomb, and we weren't guests, we were intruders. "We have to go. Now," I whispered, adrenaline finally jolting me into action. I grabbed Liam's hand, pulling him towards the door. We stumbled out into the pouring rain, not even bothering to close the cottage entrance behind us. My heart hammered against my ribs, a desperate drumbeat against the overwhelming terror. We scrambled back into the car, fumbling with the keys, the engine coughing to life with agonizing slowness. As Liam spun the car around, the headlights briefly illuminated the cottage one last time. The figure was no longer in the doorway. It was standing directly in front of the large oak tree, its form now clearer in the sudden burst of light. It was a woman, her face gaunt and streaked with what looked like dried tears, her hair wild and matted. Her eyes, though, were what truly haunt me. They were bottomless pits of sorrow and fury, fixed on us as we fled. We drove through the night, not stopping until we reached a small, brightly lit gas station on the outskirts of civilization. Liam frantically pulled out his phone. We had signal now. He went online, searching for the Airbnb listing, for Maeve's profile, for anything that could explain what we just experienced. Nothing. The listing had vanished. There was no record of it, no trace of Maeve, no cottage at those coordinates on any map, on any booking site, on anything. It was as if it had never existed. We never spoke of it again in detail, not really. How could you explain something that defied all explanation? But the memory of that cottage, the pervasive smell, the crushing cold, and the silent, sorrowful watcher at the oak tree, that lingers. It reminds me that some places aren't meant to be found. Some places aren't just old buildings. They are echoes of forgotten tragedies, waiting for an unwary soul to stumble across their permanent, silent grief. And sometimes, the most terrifying thing isn't what you see on the map, but what isn't there at all. If these accounts of unsettling Airbnbs left you wanting more, don't miss out on our future stories. Click that subscribe button and join our community of horror enthusiasts.